what I'm going to talk about is simply some stuff that I've learned so far doing service design. But just to kind of have another idea, you know, another perception, another point of view of the different definitions of service design, I thought I'd start with design. And I tend to look at sort of the classics of what has been sort of defined before. And design, if we look at one of the different definitions, design, its roots are to be found in the Latin prefix de, that means derivation, deduction, or inference, combined with the Latin word signare, namely conceptualization, imagination, and interpretation. And when combined with a Greek word, I can't pronounce that, it leads to an understanding that designing on all level of expertise implies having an intention to outline the main features of a potential solution to a problem in a particular context by designing useful physical objects or artifacts that might change existing situations. One of the classics, this is last minute entry, I was just adding it before as we were talking about the design systems, for example. It's quite a trendy thing at the moment, right? You know, all those components and so forth. This is Bruno Munari, 1965. This is a editorial sort of graphic layout project for an Audi. And that's what I've studied. I studied communication design, graphic design. And if you look back at what has been done already, you can find a lot of ideas, I think, for some of the problems that we are facing at the moment. And it's just fascinating to see how they've kind of done this already in the past. And to be fair, also when it comes to service design, I feel like we are sort of designing systems. So if we get the components, the single things right, then we kind of rearrange them around, we might get that sort of that sort of system, holistic system that we are trying to achieve, to aim for. When it comes to service, though, my background is in design, so I think one of the definitions that I like the most is something that helps somebody achieve something. Again, by Louise Stone. It's as simple as that. So let's combine the two things. And but before I can proceed to what I've done at Shelter, this is me about I don't know, a few years ago. I used to do rap kind of stuff, you know. And this is my MySpace. And by the way, there is a comment by J. Paul. If anyone doesn't know J. Paul, he's an amazing artist, and I had a comment there, which is something like it's good. Okay. At the time, so I was starting to think about the creative process without really knowing what I was doing. Was starting to look into what other people were doing. I was starting to understand the technique and then re-scramble things around to come up with something different, and always seeking for feedback and this kind of stuff. But again, I didn't really know what I was doing at the time. Well, this is a little bit later. So I was at the time I was studying culinary sciences, and this is basically the kind of stuff that we used to do in these sort of Michelin-starred restaurants. I was just a very low-level help chef. Very hard job, guys. And at the time, again, I had to kind of face that sort of question of what is creativity, what is how you come up with something different, and you know that sort of thinking kept coming back on and on and on. And a little bit later, I decided that was a little bit too hard for me, so I went to uni to study communication design. This sort of scheme from the guy before, Bruno Munari, came back again. Basically, it's like I can't remember the exact year, but it was trying to define what the design process is by making an example of when you have to cook risotto, when you have to define a recipe, what would you do? Those kind of steps might be familiar to some of you. You know, you got defining the problem, and then you define the problem components, you collect the data, you analyze the data, and then on the other side you got like definition of the problem is like green rice with spinach for 4 persons. Problem components is rice, spinach, ham, onions, oil, salt, pepper, and so forth. So data analysis, how he did it, what can you learn from him? Then you got the creativity and so forth. You can have a look into this a little bit more in detail later. But I feel like it starts to make sense somehow. A little bit later, so I moved into a course called Product Service System Design, still at Politecnico di Milano. And you start to see those kind of stuff. And I was like, wait a second, I've seen these already. So you got the sort of similar steps in which you start by understanding something. Then you somehow change things around. You think about a situation which will be different in the future, and then you make it, and perhaps you ask for feedback, and then you try to make it better next time. So it's pretty simple. There are other sort of schemes that are kind of trendy, or have been trendy. I don't know, they keep change all the time, but I feel like they are sometimes a bit, but sometimes they're also useful for us to kind of communicate what we do to those that are not familiar with it. So this one is double diamond, for example. And again, discover, define, develop, deliver. You get that, right? This is another one that is a little bit more recent that I might not fully agree with what is in here, but as we'll see in my experience at Shelter, I had to kind of try to define what I was doing by sort of having some fights really with my former sort of manager that was the lead UX. I'm a Mediterranean guy from Italy. He was from Barcelona, so you can imagine which kind of discussions we'd have. All about theory of design and which kind of methodology we should, like very nerdy stuff. But basically, I was trying to say that before you experiment with something, you create something new. You need to understand first that situation, and you need to kind of have. Yeah, you need to understand what you're gonna be creating in that whole sort of set, in that whole system, and then you can, in that space, once you define the problem space, then you can run different experiments. And this is what maybe you guys have heard about Lean UX, you heard about Agile and design thinking, and I feel like this kind of reflects roughly. What service design and design thinking is. So you first understand the whole big picture, so it takes a little bit longer. You start to understand the possible end-to-end journey, and then once the things are a little bit more defined, then you can find different ways to kind of solve that specific problem. And you can use Lean UX, which is a way to very quickly come up with experiments and test them and learn from that. And then you can later use Agile to make that sort of idea better over time, roughly. I don't know how much you guys are comfortable with this kind of terminologies, so I'm deliberately taking it very high level a bit. Unclear, I would say. But this is the one that I like the most, unclarity. You just really need to embrace unclarity, and that you don't know what is happening at first. That's where I feel like sometimes one of the main things that I've learned going to uni about service, doing a proper master in service design, was just that you are in a sort of a safe environment in which you can experience the process. And even if it goes wrong, there's not going to be people like dying, or there's no one that's going to fire you and this kind of stuff. And that is good because you can build that sort of that sort of creative confidence that even though you don't see the solution yet, you can still swim in this very abstract space first, and eventually everything's going to turn out fine, hopefully. Otherwise, you kind of go back, can kind of go back a little bit and then start again. But at least you've understood something up to that point. Okay, so shelter, well, I know that about 80% of British people have heard about shelter, so probably a big part of you know that is leading housing and homelessness charity. I've been there for a year and a half now. It's quite a small team. There's obviously different organizations have a different degree of maturity, I would say, about design and service design. We got Co-op is quite cool, I would say. Shelter is just me and another guy at the moment trying to do that sort of UX, service, UI design sort of thing. So you can imagine how difficult it might be. Also because when you want to scale up the team, then probably there's going to be someone else that is going to be made redundant. And if that person is on the front line helping people, you really want to make sure that you make the right thing. So, you know, it's not ideal, but at the same time gives you that sort of pressure to trying to do as much as possible. For those of you who don't know, basically we provide advice and help, practical help to people that are about to become homeless. Most of the time not those that are on the street, but the large majority of people that we're talking about, 100,000 in the UK that might be kicked out by the landlord, and some of them might have 3 kids, and they might suffer from depression, and they might have their partner beating them up. This kind of really dodgy stuff. You know, we are in our good London bubble, but there's loads of bad stuff happening outside, even in London as well. So when I started, nobody really knew what I was doing, or at least service design. Somebody thought I was a UX designer. Well, so I kind of took the opportunity in a certain way. One of the problem, basically, is that our helpline is open all year round, and in 2016-17, our helpline advisors spoke to 60,000 people, spending an average of 25 minutes talking to each person. The problem is that there's about 8 times more people trying to get to talk to us, which is, you know, successful, right? It's probably not that success if you want to look at it from another perspective, because it means that there is a real problem happening. So as a service designer, I was kind of faced with this problem, and we tried to understand how can we make this better. The demand is so high, how can we reduce this pressure? So yeah, what we've done, obviously, at first we had a team. It was me, lead UX at the time, guy, Eric. I miss you, Eric. And there was a product owner. It was just us, and a developer that joined later. But we spent enough time to get to understand really what was happening. So you shadow our helpline advisors. You look at research that has been done already in the past. You look at web chat logs. You go and shadow people in the physical hubs, which we provide advice. And you kind of create your research wall. It's not as cool as what we've seen before, but this is already something new for us, right? So we started to build this sort of understanding, really, always keeping in mind that what we wanted to do is deliver a substantial step towards making sure that we are there for people that need housing advice the most. This is how we somehow defined what we were doing. Kind of enough space for us to try different things, but always gave us a little bit of a direction where we wanted to go. So we found out that our service offering wasn't very clear to people in need. It was not easy to self-serve information. We were answering a large amount of non-urgent calls, and advice journeys were not consistent across the different touch points, making it hard for users to switch channel. Probably a situation that you have faced in your organization as well. So what we've done, basically, this is what I was doing in the background. I was doing the more sort of service design thing, in which you kind of try to visualize the complexity of a system of services. This is a very sort of high level, not complete work in progress sort of map, but in which you can trying to visualize how things happen and their relationship. And also like these other stuff like users map. So understanding all the people that we were interacting with, divided by sort of groups, considering what was the sort of overlaying, the main reason, the main need for them to interact with us. So we have advice seekers, professionals, supporters, because obviously we don't provide only advice, we have also a big campaigning side. So you start to categorize people by what do they want from shelter. Some of them might just want to run a marathon for us, just because they find it cool to then share on Facebook. They run a marathon, right? But it's good. Like each one of us has different motivations, so it's good just for us to understand this. So yeah, I've done this again in the background, fighting with my with Eric, and I was also doing this that helped me at least again clarifying what would have been a sort of ideal situation, like an ideal end-to-end journey in the future, be like. And I mean, this again, it wasn't officially part of my objectives, but helped me start to formulate that sort of roadmap of the different products, the different things that we would have to do to get here. So what needs to happen first and what needs to happen later. So that sort of strategy, devise a plan of action, really. So on the other side, I've done what Eric wanted me to do. So doing, workshops in which you sketch quick solutions. But at least I started to have a little bit more of an understanding of what we wanted to do. Because if you sketch solutions without, it's just waste of time. People have fun and it's all right, but what's the point of doing that if you have not defined the overall thing first? And by doing this, basically, I proposed a sort of unified entry point that we call the Get Help page. Because by doing that sort of research, we found that there were like so many inline components in the advice pages, which would prompt you to call us or use a web chat or send us an email or go to a local service, very much scattered across the advice pages, with the assumption that we would know what channel would have been better for the end user. Whereas obviously it's quite a no-brainer, but it wasn't at the time. I had to find like literally months just to say, okay, guys, just simplify this. Just signpost everyone in here. These, let me see what helped us too. So one second. This helped us basically understand how people could create this would make it possible for us to create a clear path for any advice journey with the ability to introduce and test different advice options and evaluate their impact. So you can add a, chatbot and see if that would work or not. Allow users to make a choice based on their own preference on how to access help, obviously. And provide clear alternatives to users if they're not able to access one of our services. For example, encouraging users to call the helpline if they don't have a face-to-face service available in their local area, and vice versa. If there is no one able to talk to you on the phone at the moment, maybe you want to use a web chat and so forth. And since the Get Help page went live, come on. So these are the different sort of sub-options. Obviously, we also had to do more stuff, so the more UX side of things, as redesigning the find your local service page and your helpline, call our free helpline page and so forth. But since the Get Help page has been live, it has become the most visited page on our website after the homepage. So it was clearly a sort of a need unmet there. And obviously, I think beside the data, it's also good to have received that very positive feedback from staff member, from people themselves. And there was, in one of the questions earlier, like how can you sometimes convince stakeholders, and just having, using tools like usertesting.com, when you have the voice, a tangible feedback of a user that is having some problem on the website or doesn't find something, they will empathize. It forces people to empathize with somebody. And it's like, okay, well, maybe it does make sense. So that was the starting point. The next sort of, so yeah, basically at the same time I was working on these two sort of streams. On the side I was doing that sort of service design kind of stuff, mapping things. Obviously, like not everyone gets it. It's like, why would you spend your time just? Well. But on the other side I was making more practical things, more tangible things that would make, would give a little bit more sense of what I was doing. So this is just basically the next step of what we've done. So we talked about the amount of people of calls that we were serving on the helpline. Many of those seemed like the emergency calls seemed not really emergency calls, but as we wanted to explore this space a little bit more, we wanted to understand what emergency means. At the time, we were looking at emergency situation from a legal perspective. So, if you are, like legislation says, if you are over 18 and you are male, you probably are never going to be considered an actual person in urgent need. But we kind of try to step back a little bit based on the research that we've done. And we try to consider people's individual situations and feelings around their need for help. So for example, could be somebody that has a simple disrepair problem. So the boiler is not working, not fine, but they have severe depression, they're having a panic attack. That for us had to count as an actual sort of emergency situation. So what we agreed with the stakeholders is sort of a new definition of an emergency, in which we had a more sort of human way to look at things. We have the person is or could be at risk of harm, has somewhere to sleep but nowhere to call home. The person has nowhere to sleep or might be homeless soon, but also the person feels extremely overwhelmed about their housing situation. And that was a sort of a great starting point to then develop the actual solution. By the way, we actually wanted to understand what was the amount of calls that were kind of respecting those criteria. That has been our sort of metrics against which we compared our next experiments. So you have a sort of a starting point, then you can do something and see how does it perform against that. And at the time it was about 23% of those calls. That is okay, I guess, but we could obviously do better. So what we've done is we proposed an emergency helpline, quite simple, but just by looking at other situations in which something similar happens, for example, when on the bus you got the priority seat for someone that is pregnant and so forth, and trying to look at where these solutions have been implemented already. And we incorporated those findings in our page. So in the end, it's just a simple page. It's just a few paragraphs. It's nothing special, but that really helped more people at the end of the day. So as we've implemented the first version, we had an initial sort of good result. We started from 23%, we moved towards 24, 25%. But then we moved more into the UX side of things. So we analyzed the heat maps, so how people were navigating on the website, how people were kind of finding the different options and on the page itself. We moved a few things around. We talked to other stakeholders that were signposting to this page. Well, it's been successful, I would say. After a few iterations, so callers who felt that they would be put through to an advisor as a priority calls are now 3 times more likely to have their call answered, because having an emergency helpline basically means that if you call that number, you're gonna cut the queue really of those that are not emergency. Currently around 70% of the calls to the emergency helpline are genuinely emergency cases that are getting through much faster. This was one of the most sort of risky spaces to go in, because you don't know if people want to, are gonna cheat the system or not. For example, what we found out is just by removing that paragraph in which we were explicitly say, if you call this number, you're gonna get through much faster, but please make sure you're an emergency. We just removed that, so people are not aware of that thing, and these helped increase this number a lot. Also, the second most common reason callers needed emergency help was what we've seen earlier, so that they simply felt overwhelmed by their housing situation, showing that our updated emergency criteria really made an impact. And by the way, that sort of that metrics, we were asking our own advisors to define, to kind of classify whether a call was an emergency or not. So we left that open. They are the front line, they are the ones that know better, and they are the ones that kind of can help us take a decision or not. And mostly we are now talking about 30%, it has actually even increased now, of calls that are really emergency. This is like thousands of people's life. It's good. But yeah, so at the moment, things obviously keep changing a lot, you can imagine. At the moment, as we speak, literally, we are just trying to move to to expand, obviously, service design a little bit more shelter, and defining that skeleton, that system of service components that can provide a sort of consistent journey across channels and so forth. So we'll see how can we expand these even further. But to go back to the definition, that was my sort of latest sort of attempt to make sense of what we've done. Service design is common sense making. As service designer, make sense of an opportunity, then create a context, environment maybe, I don't know, for experiences to happen better with and for everyone involved. It's done by visualizing the complexity and the consistency of a system, and by focusing on people's needs, then testing out ideas. Service design is ultimately understanding what is meaningful to people and making that happen. This is important, and consultancies sometimes don't get that just yet. But it's because it's the forgotten human side of business management, call it whatever you want to. But at the end of the day, like that's where that sort of, to say that, you got that on the side, the designers, design agencies, they're paid for by the amount of work that they do in sort of deliverables. But on the other side, they are doing just consultancy, right? It's just, you don't pay a manager for the amount of maps, or I don't know, it's just, well, anyway. So just to conclude, I thought I'd share some tools that I use, or some findings, learnings. This is Figma for UX designers, UI designer. It's beautiful. It's a sort of a sketch, but made a little bit better. It's just a quick thing. Have a look. It's amazing. And also, by the way, how it is released, I think is important for us as designer to understand how products can be done very well for end users. It's just so simple, so self-explanatory. So have a look, Figma. Next one, the one I'm using at the moment, is Real-Time Board, which is a sort of an online digital wall, which can do much more than just presentations. So for example, the mobile app, if you have loads of post-it notes, you can take a picture and it's gonna kind of crop automatically the post-it notes and digitalize them for you. It's very cool. And for remote working teams is super useful, and we have different people across the country, so it's useful. But does much more, so yeah. Next one, when it comes to kind of tangibilize, well, make tangible some of the decisions or things that you kind of that you propose. Nice and Norman Group, they are the godfathers of UX design, and as service designer, we have loads to learn from them, I would say. So there's lots of free articles. They have conferences and courses that will give you a perhaps insight on how to face a problem. And perhaps go back to management and all stakeholders with some sort of more sense of tangibility. And some of my learnings, politics matters, obviously, more than what I thought it would, like much more. So finalize over beer, so keep it casual, like, you know, that kind of we are human designers, we design for human or whatever. So let's try to keep these for our political sort of behavior as well. At the same time, understand colleagues' mental models and needs. Like, I realized later on that Eric had a very different mental model than me. He was much more into the practical side of things, sketching out things, whereas I'm more of an abstract thinker. And the two different mental models really collided. That's the reason why quite often we disagreed, but at the same time we agreed. And needs as well. So just as much as we kind of understand the user's needs, let's try to understand our stakeholders' needs, what they want, and yeah, useful. Another one, quantify the quality. We talked about this already. It's good perhaps to using metrics that the users define themselves and bring tangible results, obviously, to gain the trust from stakeholders. Share everything you know. We talked about this already, but I know that not everyone does agree. But to me, there's nothing to lose. We are all in the same boat. Like, and this is an Italian saying, all nodes will come to the com, I think. That basically means that at the end of the day, if you fake it, it's gonna, people are gonna find out. Let's just be honest. Let's just share our learnings or our all the success, but not only the success, all the things that went wrong. I did loads of mistakes at Shelter, like the find your local service product, for example, took me like 6 months to ship, just because I have not been able to engage with the stakeholder good in the first instance. There was a terrible thing to do. It wasted a lot of Shelter's money, and that's not good, for example. And so those are the learnings, plus an extra one. Nobody knows what they're doing. We are all in this together. It's changing a lot, like business is changing, like service design is a new thing. We're all trying to figure this out as we go. So let's just do this all together, and yeah, everything's gonna be fine at the end. Yeah, that's me. Cheers.